70 à tout.
All right. Well, we come to the end. We come to the end of the show. And before I don't know if you guys have been waiting for it, but it's here, and it's our review of Blade Runner 2049. This month's theme is box office flops. Hold on. I don't see. Oh, okay. All right. The budget was 150 to 185 million dollars, and that's probably not including. Marketing, because they never include marketing. But the box office profits were $260.5 million. So if we're to pad the budget with the inclusion of marketing, we're easily talking about a $200 million movie.
So, here's the thing with because you have production that because all the 150 to 185 million is production costs.
Mhm.
That doesn't include the actor salary, doesn't include marketing. So
Mhm.
they probably spent just about as much as they made. That's about how much they spent. And the projections that I saw as far as movies that like the biggest losers of money, like the AAA films that are
Mhm.
the biggest losers of money. They said they lost probably close to $100 million on this film,
Mhm.
which is kind of unfortunate because it's not a bad film. It's really not.
Right. It's not, but I don't know.
But
I think I
yeah,
don't. Yeah, I don't. I just think this is one of those unnecessary sequels. Because like the original Blade Runner, that was magnificent. That was a work of art.
which
Um,
we've reviewed. Yeah, it's
yeah, which
great.
we reviewed, and it was great. But
And the thing is, they've been trying to make this sequel since the '90s, but they had like some licensing issues
mhm,
and um, it didn't get made until about like 30 years later. And yeah, a lot of the licensing that because Coca-Cola was involved. Uh, you had all these like companies that were involved, but like yeah, it's just it's weird. It's a good movie, but it just I don't know. Like I don't know if it necessarily added on to the lore. I would have been fine with just the one Blade Runner. I still had questions from Blade Runner,
mhm.
but I don't know if this movie necessarily answered those questions.
No, not really. It just kind of asked the same question that Blade Runner asked.
Yeah,
And I
like I
think
said, I
and I
don't.
think yeah. So I think that was one of the problems with it. But yeah, let's get into it a little bit more. Let me start off with the synopsis for the movie. Okay, so here's a synopsis for Blade Runner 2049. Officer K, a new Blade Runner for the Los Angeles Police Department, unearths a long buried secret that has the potential to plunge what's left of society into chaos. His discovery leads him on a quiet on a I'm sorry. His discovery leads him on a quest to find Rick Deckard, a former Blade Runner who's been missing for 30 years.
I the way we talked about it is like how it didn't really answer any questions from the original, right?
Mhm.
Well, I mean the whole story that this is whole all based off is a question. Do androids dream of electric sheep? And uh, well, we're left with like I wouldn't really call it a cliffhanger at the end of the original Blade Runner. But there's a lot of questions that are involved, and this this new film kind of continues on this like kind of this journey of Blade Runners. We obviously we get the idea of the humans against the replicants, and there's still there's still a remnant of the replicants that Officer Deckard was trying to eliminate, but it doesn't really answer any of the questions left in the original.
No, it didn't. It didn't. And like how I said in the beginning, this movie basically asks the same question as the first one. It's like, what is human? What is what constitutes the soul? Um, and I think the first one, did a handsome job of answering enough questions to make you start thinking about it yourself and coming to your own conclusions. But this movie, it just doesn't. It doesn't provoke the same line of thought
This one is definitely
or
not
curiosity.
satisfying as Blade Runner. Yeah, this one is not as satisfying as the original.
No.
Here's one thing that's been bothering me since when we did the review of the original. I still don't fucking understand the test, the replicant test. And I think they call it it's like the something comp test.
Right, like the baseline test.
Yeah, the baseline test. There's a term that a lot of the fans have used for it, and it's based off of because this whole story is based off of a book called "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep," which I've not read, which I'm probably gonna read just because. But yeah, I still don't fucking understand that baseline test. Like, what is the point? What is it about that test that that determines who is human and who is a replicant? I don't fucking get it. I mean, it has
Right. Well, in the original,
but I don't get it.
In the original Blade Runner, it seemed like more of a test about capacity. So, like the questions like they were asked were kind of like, the questions that were asked of them in the original Blade Runner was more like because and like the replicants or the skin jobs, as they were euphemistically called, they wouldn't have the depth that a human would have to answer those questions. And I think that was the purpose of the test in the original Blade Runner. But in the sequel, I think it was more about processing. And so, like, if the android was able to keep up without having a delay and not, like, I don't know, like, because supposedly, the new head honcho at the company that makes these things, had somewhat improved them, and so, like, they were faster, smarter, or whatever, and so, like, and maybe they were given more, like, emotional capacity, to whatever extent that they were able to, and so, like, like in the second test that K does, he kind of has like those physiological markers, after he gets rattled by the revelation that he could possibly be, this, an offspring of a replicant. And so, he has like these, he has like that gulp, and he kind, and so he might be having, he might not be answering as fast. So that might be one of the reasons.
Well, here's what like bothered me about like you know, and I might have to go back and watch the original Blade Runner again,
Mm-hmm.
but the questions like it wasn't like yeah they were asking questions, but it wasn't necessarily him answering questions. It was he had to repeat these phrases like where he would like say like oh well say where they're asking a question cells 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 or it's and he's just repeating these fucking phrases and I'm like what the fuck does this have to do with like how does this determine him being a replicant or not I just I couldn't I didn't fucking get it.
Right. I mean, I'm just trying to do my best to put my own interpretation or spin on things. But maybe it happened. It maybe that your your inability to comprehend the test maybe uh, have to do with the lack of skill of the director. So maybe he was trying maybe he was trying to do like an updated version of the test from Blade Runner, but he didn't fully understand the original test in Blade Runner, so he just kind of created this thing, and because most people maybe most people or a lot of people who knew about the original movie are so far removed that the new audience is not really going to question uh, the kind of
Maybe,
shortcomings.
yeah, yeah, you're right. Maybe that's what it is. And but even then, like even when it comes to the original Blade Runner, and like I said, I'm probably gonna have to watch it again just
Mm-hmm.
to remember how Deckard uh, gave the test to these replicants, like what he said, um, and how the test was given. But from what I remember from the original, it was like obviously because it wasn't just the questions, it was him looking at their eye and how their eye reacted to the questions, and that was what apparently was the importance of their reaction to the question because there are certain words is like it kind of like affects your nervous system. It's like oh that's kind of a shocking question, and
Well,
a
right, because
human
that goes to what I was saying originally about how the questions were designed to uh, provoke some sort of physiological response, and if you're an android, you don't necessarily you're not capable of going deep into the question, and so you might give a stilted or more what's that more face value answer.
yeah. And and maybe like they changed it just enough in this film where I'm like, I had no idea what the fuck was going on with that baseline test.
Right, yeah, and again, that might be on the part of an inept or a director that lacks the skill to what is it, reinterpret or transpose what that test was really supposed to do for this movie.
Yeah, because I don't know. I felt like when I don't know. This is the one thing that's been like bothering me since the original because
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't quite grasping that what the test was trying to do. Like why like they would question why they would answer or ask these certain questions for the test, and this movie definitely did not help with that at all. Like, I felt more confused when it came to that. I don't know if you felt the same way, but I felt more confused when it came to the test, the replicant test.
I don't know. I really I honestly didn't. I guess I I guess I wasn't as bogged down by the test as you, because I just took the test as kind of a continuation of what happened in the first one, but just again like re transposed for today. But yeah, but thinking about it now, it could have just again, it just could have been lack of skill on half of maybe like either the writer or the director, not fully comprehending what the test is, or just failing to make it their own in a sense.
Maybe that's what it was. Yeah. Now you had some interest. You said you had some thoughts on the film, and uh, you've been kind of holding it to the chest. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts were on the film.
Well, mm, the thing that I honed in on was themes, and one of the themes that really stuck out to me was envy, the envy, and just thinking about the film, like there was more and more this theme of envy was coming through. Firstly, in that scene where you had what's his face, yeah, the Wallace character, played by what's his face, Jared Leto. That's right. And how he inspects like the latest replicant that he made, um, and how he's talking, and he obviously compares himself to Tyrell, the original.
Wallace, played by Jared Leto, he is a replicant or some sort of android, right?
No,
Well, what the hell is all the chips and stuff that he puts on his neck and stuff?
I think that's just an implant because I think because he's blind, that's why he uses those drones. Because he says, "Oh, let's take a look at you." He can't look at him, look at the he can't see with his eyes. He has to use the technology to then hijack directly into his visual cortex or whatever and use like these drones.
Okay, so that's what that was. Okay, I thought he
Yeah.
may have been like a replicant of some sort, and like that was the whole thing. Okay,
Right, yeah, but in that scene, he reveals his envy of Tyrell because he knows that Tyrell had created this because like the tagline from first Blade Runner was these replicants are more human than human, and so
right.
so Wallace was trying to catch up to him, and he was envious of Tyrell because he was able to create a replicant that was more human than human, which we'll find out. Uh, the extent of which later on in this review. But the theme of envy or like maybe even inadequacy, it kind of goes through this entire movie if you really look at it. Um, what is it? Oh, the AI girlfriend. Even she has feelings of envy or inadequacy because she had to use a prostitute um, to act as a surrogate for her to be physically intimate with Kay.
Now, was the prostitute, was she a replicant?
Yeah, she was.
Because
She was also a replicant.
okay,
So yeah, so she, so the AI hollow girlfriend
yeah,
was,
Joy was
Joy.
the
She was envious of this prostitute because she doesn't have a physical form, so she had to use the prostitute as a surrogate so that she can be intimate with Kay. And you could hear it in her voice when she was like trying to dismiss the prostitute in the morning, where it's like, oh, I'm done with you, you can leave. But then the prostitute like throws it back in her face, saying, well, you're not even a real person, or
it's like
thanks for your money, I'm done with you now.
yeah, that one thing that because that's actually a good point. I didn't think of the idea of envy, which is actually a great point. Um, I saw a lot of more like real world. to today, where we have a culture of men who are, it's kind of like, they're looking for all these type of joys in a lot of, and I think that was a very great name for this like AI character that was Kay's girlfriend. They're looking for this certain joy of a relationship that like isn't really real, but it seems real, right? And obviously we were we were having a very interesting conversation before we even started about like the whole OnlyFans thing and the Simp Nation and all that stuff. Which is, it's essentially trying to create relationships that aren't real.
Right.
And then you also have the idea of, we have another character that turns out to be the offspring of Rachel, who is a replicant in the original, and Officer Deckard, Harrison Ford's character from the original, who is
Right. Rachel, played by Sean Young, who was back in the day at Tasty Slice.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's trapped in a bubble, and yeah, it's just kind of like this whole like, oh, I'm immunocompromised, so I'm trapped in this bubble, I'm trapped in this prison. Yet, like, she's kind of like, she creates this imagination that she's able to create these memories and imagination
Yeah,
stuff
for the
that no one
replicants.
else can.
Which, yeah, which
Yeah,
again, like, which does tie into the theme of envy, because because she's immunocompromised, she can never leave that room. And so,
right.
even though she says like, oh, these replicants live such hard lives, they should at least have, a good memory. But it's just like, she creates memories, even, you know, but she'll never be able to create any memories of her own.
Yeah, it's
Again, tying in the theme of envy.
yeah, this is a really strange movie. Like, I like it. Um, like I said, I don't think it adds on to the original in any way. It's kind of like just a continuing question from the original, but it's it, it's interesting. I really like this. I like this film a lot.
Yeah, I mean, this was an
Not as
enjoyable
good.
film, and I think just visually, I think it, it was very stunning and competently done. Just like the set pieces alone, it was just incredible. Uh, as much as there was world building in the first Blade Runner, this movie definitely takes takes the foundation and definitely builds on it. And I think builds on it to a very effective level.
Well, and like I said, the obviously the big question in the Blade Runner universe is what is human, and obviously, like, you have these replicants who are, supposedly, quote unquote, better than humans. And now that the fact that they can procreate, that they can create their own kind, that throws a huge kink in the whole thing. Which obviously the humans are wanting to, like, we need to get rid of this and rid of any like thought that replicants can procreate.
Right, exact. Yeah, and that was part of the envy of Wallace to Tyrell, because you know, like with the expansion of the human race into outer space and into colonies and stuff, they needed to create this disposable labor force, but because resources are limited, they can only make so many replicants. They can only
Right.
make so many replicants, and it probably took them a great while for them to create them also. And so if you could have if you could have your workforce replicate itself, reproduce itself, then you would be able to cut costs, and you'd be able to create uh, more product quicker.
Well, here's another thing about the whole like the envy thing is because we look at the world that Blade Runner is in, because we're only seeing on Earth, so we're seeing
Mhm.
like Los Angeles, San Diego, and especially in this film, we're seeing Los Angeles, San Diego, parts of California. It's essentially desolate. There's nobody there. Like the
Yeah,
world
it's
is
dead.
pretty much
I mean,
fucked. So
right? Like
everyone is
when
looking
K
to
when K
offset.
when K is at that kind of outdoor restaurant eatery thing. He was looking at the crime scene photos, and that prostitute replicant comes and it's like, oh, what's that? In the picture, and in the picture it's a picture of a dead tree, and it's
Yeah,
propped up, and it's propped up by stabilizing wires, and so the fact that you know she didn't recognize it as a tree just goes to show you how much of the resources were depleted.
right. It's a disconnect.
Yeah. It's like it's like
Yeah,
that list that it's like that list that the University of Minnesota I think puts out every so
right,
often, talking about like, oh, if you were born, this year, then you have no idea about, and all of these like obsolete technologies and whatnot.
right. But the whole idea of going off world, it's only the real elite go off world.
Right. Yeah, the people who have the money, the big corporations, they're the only ones who can afford to go off world and mine for resources.
Yeah, so envy is a great theme that I guess I never didn't recognize until you kind of mentioned it. Which is
Right.
kind of the whole theme of the Blade Runner universe in a way. And you look, and obviously, like the when we look at the original compared to 2049, is you can see like degradation of population because uh, in the time of the original with Officer Deckard, there's actually like quite a few people, like quite a lot of people there. Yet when you look at the time of with Officer K, it's really, really desolate.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I
Almost like the
mean,
entire thing is in ruins.
right, and even though they're in a metropolitan area, urban area,
Nobody's there.
there isn't a lot of people. Like even like
No.
in the prior Blade Runner, it was really more of a dystopian, neo cyber noir kind of movie where it was like this big city and there was like a lot of people and there was a hustle and bustle, but a lot of times, like especially when Kay is like walking the streets, he's mostly by himself, except for like maybe like one or two people on the street,
Right.
and so yeah, the theme of envy, I think is all throughout this movie, and especially especially they easily bring it to biblical reference when when they eventually bring in Deckard and he mentions he mentions the replicant Rachel, and it's like, and he quotes Genesis saying like, oh, and God remembered Rachel and he opened up her womb. And again, that's again the theme of envy, because if you're not familiar with the tale of the tale in the Bible about Jacob and his two wives, who are sisters,
Yeah.
and Rachel, even though she was the favorite, she was the most beloved by her husband Jacob.
Speaking of polygamy,
Speaking yeah, speaking of polygamy, uh, but yeah, there's like this whole backstory of Jacob. He wanted Rachel. He worked and toiled for 7 years to get her, but then is tricked by his father-in-law to take the older sister. So he
Yeah.
makes him, yeah. So then he makes him wait for, he makes him work for, he makes Jacob work for him for another 7 years to finally get Rachel. But then when he gets Rachel, she is barren. And so, and Leah, his wife Leah, who's the oldest, but then not that attractive, tries to win Jacob's favor by, having children and whatnot and whatever. But then finally, God hears Rachel's prayers, um, and she finally gives Jacob a child. And so,
Yep.
kind of like in the similarly, you know, the replicants, they were just thought of these, commodity, these disposable people, or even non-people. But then, kind of God, heard their cries and gave them a child, gave them kind of like the replicant savior,
Yeah.
which we then find out is that young woman who's the bubble girl, who's immunocompromised, can never leave the bubble.
Right. And we're kind of led on like the throughout the movie where it's like, oh, it's got to be K. K is the
Right, and interesting enough, the name that the Joy character gives him is Joe, and the first child of Rachel in the Bible is named
it's
Joseph.
Joseph.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
So
and
that's
and another quick tie into the Bible is he was given a dream. He's given a dream of that
yep.
the scene. It was actually that the Bubble Girl's memory, but it was implanted into Joe, or that's the name that Joy gives him, but Officer K.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Yeah.
so
So
kind
it's
of
kind
a
of like
biblical
a
tie-in,
really there's a lot of like biblical tie-ins to this film. It was very interesting.
right? And I
Um.
think and it's interesting, and again, like that's why I saw the theme of envy, because like the story of Jacob, Leah, and Rachel is about envy as well, because Jacob wanted Rachel, uh, and but he got Leah instead, and so Leah kept trying to gain Jacob's favor by bearing him sons, and then when she eventually could not have sons, she gave Jacob one of her servants to have more sons, and then when Rachel, and again envy, when Rachel saw this was happening, she's like she then gives Jacob one of her servants to have children with in her stead. Uh,
Yep.
so it all and it's all and it all ties back to the theme of envy.
I think too, like you also have like going on that theme, you have Kay who are also known as Joe. He's envious because he thought he was son of Deckard, that he was the chosen replicant
Right, right, right,
offspring. But the reality was that's not who he was at all. And I think there was some envy there too. It's like, fuck, I'm not the chosen one.
right. Yeah, and, and that was the whole scene. That was a whole like love making scene between him, Joe, him, Joy, and the replicant prostitute. It's because like
Yeah.
she whether it was programming or just kind of like or just her genuine affection for him, but she's like, you're special now, you deserve a life, you deserve all the things that a real person deserves, and that's kind of what led to like the whole lovemaking scene, which still ties to the theme of envy, because Joy isn't a
Right.
physical person and she had to use a surrogate, kind of like Jacob, Leah, and Rachel story, because
Yeah.
because Rachel wasn't able to uh, have children for Jacob, she gave him her servant as a surrogate. Um, Yeah,
So yeah,
and even in the villain characters. I mean, we already talked about Tyrell, no Wallace, but the replicant servant to Wallace, Love. Uh, I think she too was envious. Um,
well, yeah, the female replicant that was kind of like loyal to Wallace. Her name Love?
yeah, Love,
L-
LUV.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, and like you
she was envious.
right. She was envious because Kay actually had she kind of was making fun of him for having the virtual girlfriend, uh, but in the scenes where in the set piece where Kay or Joe, let's call him Joe. Joe finds Deckard, and they are able to track uh, Joe to Deckard, and the missile comes in and kind of blows up the room, and then the special hollow emitter that Kay had on him with the Joy program, and and
Yeah,
Love saw this, and she's like, oh, so glad are enjoying our product, and she goes and stomps on it, effectively killing the killing
Joy.
Joy, uh, and again, it's like she's named Love, but she doesn't know Love.
Yeah,
And again, having that envy, um, and even in the final fight scene, Joe and Love are fighting, and then she kind of randomly out of nowhere kisses Joe. Kind of like,
I'm the best,
what was that?
and she says I'm the best one.
Right, I'm the yeah. It's like because Joe is able to live a more full life, and able to know what love is, even though she is love to Wallace, she doesn't get the same experience of love.
Right, right, right. So, yeah, man, this is an interesting film. I It has a lot of like deep deep thought provoking um moments, but I don't know if it touches the original, and I don't know if it necessarily adds on to the original.
I mean, you could say that it does because it expands it in the sense that the replicants are at the very least capable of you know procreation. Whether or not it's available to all replicants, or if it was just a special feature of the Rachel model, uh, I
Right.
don't know, because the past replicants were all made by Tyrell, and who's to say that and I think most recently the TV series Westworld was kind of tackling this as well, um, but because in Westworld the creator was slowly giving consciousness to the robots. And so, who's to say
Right.
that Tyrell wasn't slowly giving the gift of life to the replicants?
Makes sense. And obviously, like Rachel was like kind of this special replicant that he created, like it, different from all his other past creations too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So yeah, yeah, it's. I didn't say that it doesn't necessarily add on to the original in the sense that like it doesn't ask any new questions.
mm-hmm.
Um, I just think it asks a lot of the same questions.
Yeah, right. It's asking the same question, but just differently. And
Yeah,
it's like just because Rachel. was able to have a child, that doesn't mean that necessarily all replicants are now capable of having children. Even
Right, right,
Wallace,
right.
Wallace was looking for that ability. Like he was trying to create, uh, a replicant that could procreate, but but he wasn't able to.
Right.
So like yeah,
And
so
it's also possible that
that's what didn't really work for me. Like the replicant, freedom fighters, essentially.
yeah,
It's just
that was
like
like that whole thing like bugged me too because it came out of nowhere and it's like and the thing is they didn't do anything.
right, and they were like they were waiting for the robot messiah, but it was this girl who who couldn't even leave her bubble because she died,
Right.
and so if so it doesn't, and again it doesn't, and again just because Rachel had children doesn't mean every replicant could have children. I mean, could it possibly be because Tyrell was slowly giving the ability to procreate to the replicants? Maybe, but that
Well, and
doesn't.
here's the other thing is like what we don't realize that like maybe like in his creation he had no idea that this was even possible.
Mhm.
That like Tyrell, yeah, he created this special replicant and it was meant to kind of it was a better replicant that could fight the replicant test because you look at the story and how the previous generation of next it was like Nexus 6,
Mhm.
it took them like 7 or 8 times to figure out like, oh, this is a replicant. Whereas with Rachel, who was the next generation of replicants, it took over 100 questions to figure out if she was actually a replicant or not. So
Right.
it's possible that even Tyrell, he was just trying to create a better replicant and realize that the capability that she could actually procreate and make a new creation.
Right. I think. Oh, now that we're talking about it, yeah, because like the whole idea of the first Blade Runner was, what is human, what is a soul? Can a machine have a soul? Essentially, and
Right.
I think you know uh, with the Rachel model, he was saying like, yes, they can. It's gonna. Then this is my final creation. This is the one. This is the one that could have a soul. But it
Right.
didn't necessarily mean that that they'd be able to procreate. It's just he just wanted to continue on the soul, not necessarily the flesh.
Right.
So I think this is where in this movie I think this is where it fails, in that as opposed to carrying on the soul, this movie was trying to say like, oh, let's carry on the flesh,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
because at the time I think people would agree that it was the soul that made the human different, different than the machine. But in this movie, it's saying no. It's like it's the flesh that makes the human.
Yeah. That's I would agree with that 100%.
Well, that's all I
Uh,
gotta say about that.
yeah, that's all
You
I
have
gotta
any
say
final
about that
thoughts?
too. No, like I said, like I think we answered like some of like I think the major questions. Like I still want to like research the whole idea behind the replicant testing, just
Mm-hmm.
because I think there's something there that I'm missing. And maybe it takes me like actually reading the book. Um, but no, this is an interesting film. And, I tried to choose films in this month that were yeah they lost money, but that weren't complete like utter shit. And this movie is not shit. This is actually a good film. Um, is it as good as the original? I don't think. No, it's not as good as the original. Um, but it's a good film. If I was gonna give it a rating, I'd give it I'd give it like 3 stars. I think that's pretty
Okay.
fair.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, so my rating also would be a 3 as well.
Cause
Yeah, this
because it looks beautiful. It looks
mhm.
great.
Right, yeah, it
The
definitely it
story,
definitely built upon the foundation that the first Blade Runner created, and yeah, the visuals were just amazing. The set design, the lighting design, it was all fantastic.
yeah, it looked great. I thought the acting was good. The actors were great. This it's just like I think the story was lacking in some parts. It didn't necessarily continue. It continued some of the questions, but it didn't necessarily answer some of the questions. And I don't know. I think it could have done more story wise, but everything else like was pretty good.
Yeah,
I didn't
agreed.
feel like there was any I didn't feel like there was like any unnecessary scenes or unnecessary characters or anything like that. And the cinematography
Right.
was
I mean,
good.
yeah, the only unnecessarily element that I think could have done without was just like the replicant underground, the replicant freedom fighters.
Right, yeah.
That
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 was
that
the
was very
like
clumsy. That was very clumsy, and just like it just came out of nowhere. It literally came out of nowhere.
yeah. There was no like that. I agree. That was like the one scene where was like, yeah, that could have been cut.
That was like the one element of the movie that it's like if it was gone, it really wouldn't have changed the movie
Because you still would
that
have felt like
much.
that there was because there's definitely a connection between Deckard and Kay. Whether it was in his own mind that he was thinking that he was the son of Deckard, or just like he actually liked him and he went to go and rescue him uh from like from his captors. But
Uh,
yeah, like the whole yeah, you're right. The whole underground movement is like waste of time. Waste of time.
Great. Well, there you have it. That's our review of Blade Runner 2049. Both Robert and I give it a 3. Would recommend um,
Watch Blade Runner with this
Blade
movie
Runner. Yeah,
though.
Blade Runner first. Blade Runner first, of course. But yeah, and maybe for extra credit, read the novel that the Blade Runner movie is
Oh,
based on.
I'm definitely gonna pick up the novel.
Okay. Uh, yeah. So for extra credit, pick up the novel. Do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. And so yeah, so give it a watch. Uh, Let us know what you think in the comments below or on Letterboxd.